Hi, I'm Rebekah Reysen. Good to see you all. I'm here with Jeremy Roberts, and we'd like to welcome you to the ChitChat. Today we have two amazing guests, and let me tell you more about our special guests. Dr. Ann Monroe is Assistant Dean, Director of Assessment, and Associate Professor in the School of Education at the University of Mississippi. Before her time at UM, Dr. Monroe was a third grade teacher with the Hamilton County School System in Chattanooga, Tennessee. She comes from a family of educators and believes wholeheartedly in the transformative power of teaching and learning. She was named the LCM Hood Outstanding Teacher for the University of Mississippi in 2018. Dr. Monroe teaches a variety of courses, including education foundations, curriculum development, and assessment. Her research focuses on how teachers can promote pride and minimize shame in their classroom activities and lessons. She serves on numerous thesis and dissertation committees, is current chair of the IHL's Educator Preparation Collaboration Committee, and is a member of the School of Education Alumni Board and the 21 United Mississippi Board. Dr. Monroe received her master's and doctoral degrees from the University of Mississippi, and she received her bachelor's degree from the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. Dr. Joel Amidon is Associate Professor in the Department of Teacher Education and the Coordinator of Doctoral Programs in the Department of Teacher Education at the University of Mississippi. Dr. Amidon is the host of the Amidon Planet podcast and the co-host of the Teaching Math Teaching podcast. In general, his framework is focused on leading people to love others through teaching. Well, welcome to the show. Good to see you guys.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's good to see you. Well, thanks for sharing your valuable time with us. Let's kind of start off with talking about who you guys are, amazing people, of course, and how you started in the field of education.
Okay, I guess, do you want me to start, Joel?
Absolutely.
Of course. No, I like you said, Rebekah, I come from a family of educators, and so I grew up listening to my mom and my aunts. There are 6 of them talking about school. They're all teachers, and just hearing about school, sitting on their laps, while they were discussing. And I really kind of always knew I wanted to be a teacher. Just something, I know some people come to that later in life, but for me, it was since about 4th grade. I was pretty sure that's what I wanted to do, and obviously went to school to do that, and started teaching, taught 3rd and 5th grades, 3rd grade primarily, and ended up at the university to come down, and my husband got a fellowship to study William Faulkner, and so I was like, well, I guess I'll be going to grad school now too. And so we came down and started and haven't left. So that's how I am here. And I absolutely love my job. I love working with pre-service teachers. I miss the classroom for sure, although I do have opportunity to see the classroom and go out to schools and that type of thing. But I absolutely love working with pre-service teachers and having the ability to influence them, and that gives me influence on K-12 students as well, and in just a different way.
Right. So I actually was a first generation college student, and so I never really wondered about, my dad got an associate's degree. He was a police officer. So, he had some training, and that was pretty rare for someone that's going in to become a police officer in northern Wisconsin. And so I guess there's a value of education from the start, but he'd never, finished a 4-year degree or went away to school. And so it was kind of this unknown sort of thing. And I was pretty good at school and fairly successful. And just it kind of made sense. It was like a game that I felt like I knew how to play, and went through in mathematics. I was always strong at mathematics. And so again, there's all these doors were open. And so it was almost like which door to go through. And so I went to the University of Wisconsin, so many majors, and I tried out a few of them, computer science, math, pure math. All of them, and even, looked at business a little bit, but then just, there was some experiences I had as a counselor at Boys State. I don't know that up in Wisconsin, it was Badger Boys State. I think in Mississippi, it's Magnolia Boys State, and where I got met a lot of teachers, a lot of educators, and had some interactions as a leader, a teacher of young men. I was just a few years older than them, but they were in high school, and it was just like this really started. This felt like it clicked. Like I really was doing something beyond just getting a paycheck, and with math, the lots of doors were open. And so then it led to becoming a math teacher. And then I was a high school math teacher in a district not too far from Madison, Wisconsin, and some curriculum. And that led to some experiences with, which I didn't know at the time. So I'm like, and got a little nudge to go get a doctoral degree. And it's just like, there's little things here and there, little nudges, and they all came from, experiences in education, nudge here, nudge there, that led to, getting a doctoral degree, which, again, first generation college student, where we're like, what's a FAFSA? Like from that to writing a book, what? Like, it was just unreal. And then, but then, seeing this, and like, so one story I have is like, this, like, I didn't have, but then in hindsight and looking at through my doctoral program, I did notice, like, I had some privilege. I had a lot of privilege in some of my experiences in education, and thinking, like, when I struggled in a math classroom, I saw math teachers that looked like me, and were same demographics, almost had these same glasses on, and it's like, there's like this idea, like, I could have been successful. And so, like, that one narrative of going through and then looking back and saying, maybe that narrative has changed, and then wanting and seeing the power of education in my own life, and wanting that for others, and wanting to see, like, how can teachers be knowledgeable of the power they have in the classroom to influence things. And now, just like Dr. Monroe said, getting a chance to work with teachers and influence and share perspectives, and maybe giving them teachers ideas about just how powerful their interactions are, and who they see as doers in the classroom, especially specifically in the math classroom, and what that means going forward. And so it's and again, I love my job too. And I love, like, we have a thing, Ann and I are like Batman and Robin. Like, we do a lot of good things together. Like, there's projects that are going on. I'm Robin. From her bio, and then she's Batman. But no, like, having the opportunity to, and then getting two people like ourselves who think, like, what can we do? She had some background in thinking about shame, and I like to think about how do we influence in the math classroom, and we're kind of doing some projects thinking about those things together. Mm-hmm. And now get to, generations of teachers that we get to do an influence on, and that's a fun job to do. So
so with y'all working with students who want to become teachers, and unfortunately with what we're dealing with right now with COVID, what are some changes that you're seeing that our students are having to adapt to prepare to become the next classroom teacher?
You go in.
Okay. I mean, the obvious thing, Jeremy, is that, our students are encountering in their college experience a lot more virtual learning, a lot of remote modalities and things that are different for them, for their learning. And I know what we're trying to do in the School of Education, in our courses that our students are in, is to model for them what good practice looks like in a virtual setting, in a remote classroom. So I think we have sort of we will, obviously, as teachers in the School of Education and instructors, we want to make the best class we can for our candidates so that they are learning what they need to learn. But also, we have a responsibility to model the types of teaching practices and teaching strategies that we want them to use with their future students. So it's kind of this double responsibility: making great class experience for these School of Ed candidates, and then also modeling what we hope that they're going to be doing with their students. And obviously, we hope that a lot of these things that we're doing are temporary in nature, but we don't know. And also, just the nature of education itself is changing, and so a lot of the things that we're experiencing can still be helpful, even if things go back to what we would consider normal at some point. There are a lot of things that we're picking up, and I know Joel can talk about this too, that we're seeing are great benefits of some of the remote instruction, or the some of the tools that we're using that can be used in a lot of different settings. And so I think for our candidates, I think they're picking up on some things that they can use in the classroom. And then also, with our seniors, we have seniors placed out in the schools right now where they're dealing with some of the kids, they're seeing how K-12 students some of them are face-to-face, some of them are virtual. how is a teacher juggling that? What does that look like? They're out there in the classrooms with those teachers working in that setting. And so they're kind of getting, a good idea of what that looks like.
Yeah, and thinking about we're very meta, right? So
Mhm.
thinking like we're having classes with students who are also teachers. So everything we're doing. And so one of the thing I think that the big thing that we need to model for them is that we're learning, right? We're learning all the time. So even as we're doing the class, we're like, this arrangement with breakout rooms and Zoom is not going to work. I'm going to
Mhm.
switch out something a little bit. But even just seeing from, the increased collaboration amongst instructors about how do we best set up our classrooms for success, not just for this, possibly temporary, hopefully temporary arrangement, but for the future, so that whatever we're designing, and this is, you probably have talked about somebody with this in the previous episodes about resilient pedagogy, resilient
Mhm.
teaching, and thinking about what stuff that we're doing now that not only will work for this arrangement, but will also make our teaching better going forward. And then again, being as transparent as possible with our students so they can see that as well, so that when they're experiencing their field placements, or they're seeing what we're doing, and then they're going to graduate and go in their own classrooms, and they're going to be laying a lot of groundwork for what they're going to be doing as early teachers, thinking about what are they doing, what can they do to create stable things or resilient things that will last for them going forward. So
Mhm.
like, so assessments, right? We're gonna do some things that are dealing with interactive or more sensitive that way, rather than shoot, I can't get to the copy machine today. Like, we don't, that's like a switch that's gone by. Like, okay, how do we move forward in how we set up our classrooms pretty quickly?
Mhm. Well, and in terms of, assessment's such a huge part of education. And I know you guys are experts on assessment. So has that process changed at all in COVID, and just in terms of assessment in general, and anything that you kind of tweaked or worked on, and what does that look like?
Well, I think interestingly enough, Joel and I work with our resilient teaching community in the teacher education department. So we did the summer training that the university had with Josh Eiler and others.
Mhm.
And so we're leading the community that we have in teacher education, and we're focusing on a concept or a topic a month with our community. And this month happens to be assessment. So we're sharing ideas and things like that. But I think from what I've seen for me personally, and then what I've seen in our community, that we're all trying to do a little bit more focus on formative assessment and less focus on these big summative assessments for various reasons. But just the power of formative assessment, we teach our pre-service teachers that, and how formative assessment is so important on a daily basis, and checking in on students and seeing where the progress is, seeing where there's misunderstandings, and being able to fix those. With formative assessment, you can do those fixes quickly.
Mhm.
And so your instruction is fine-tuned based on those formative assessments, where summative assessments give you a picture, an important picture, but certainly a picture kind of at the end of something, where it's not quite as, influential on your day-to-day teaching. And so I think a strong reliance on formative assessment, Rebekah, has been sort of a slight pivot in that direction. And then also just thinking about ways that, how can we use assessment that really focuses on how our students are applying the knowledge, not just rote memorization and things like that, but some application, really looking at some what we would call authentic assessments. And we tend to focus on authentic assessments in the School of Ed anyway, because they're making materials, they're creating unit plans and lesson plans. And so it's a more authentic type of assessment or project-based assessment anyway. But I think, really looking at moving toward how do we avoid some of these pitfalls of worrying about if somebody's cheating on something, or I know that was a big thing that came up, I think, in the faculty senate or whatever. But if you have assessments where students are having to apply the knowledge, that's really not a big issue. Or you have more open-ended assessments where they're writing about what they know about something. So we've had some really good opportunities to share this month with our faculty. Joel can talk a little bit more about that, but it's been fun because we're all learning new things and trying out new stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and that just goes, I mean, that, I think there was an email that talked about the struggles that people were having possibly with, assessments online and people cheating. Well, if your assessments, if your quizzes or tests are basically a bunch of trivia questions, that's, when did this happen with it, like, versus like, how do you apply the knowledge? And so like thinking about how do you make assessments that are, a little bit more sturdier and having students apply knowledge rather than just regurgitate it. And so, and even taking it even further with the ideas of formative assessment. And if you've seen evidence of students meeting some objective that they're covering later on a summative assessment, but if you're formatively assessing, I've seen this, like you can legitimately say like, I've seen them meet this objective for the class. And so you have some sort of documentation to say like, I've seen this and I can, legitimately give you this grade based off of your understanding that I've already seen. But, so that opens up opportunities, and we're playing around in the School of Ed with some feedback things that we're using to collect information. So like this month we did Padlet, and so instructors that maybe haven't seen Padlet, we did that as a way to get some feedback on assessment. Next week, next month, we're doing Flipgrid. And so getting exposure to that. And again, those are opportunities to not only to demonstrate, very meta again, demonstrate to our students, how do you create community from a distance, right? Is using something like Flipgrid where there's video capture of like short snippets, which it's kind of like, an discussion board via Instagram kind of together, and then also to use it possibly as an assessment thing. Hey, like I'm going to have my students share with me their philosophy statement of teaching and what's something that has happened during this semester that has influenced it and why they're, they've rooted further in this statement about what they stand for in the classroom. And that's going to be a good way to say like, how are they being a reflective practitioner? Boom, there it is, so and it's something that they can then use when they're working with their own students in their own classrooms.
So, and then in terms of, pedagogy, because I know there's really a knack to pedagogy and engaging students. But in terms of advice maybe that you have for people in engaging students, because I know Jeremy and I teach a lot of classes on study skills, and study skills are not difficult, theoretically to teach, but in terms of making it an engaging process for students. We have tricks that we use, but do you have any advice for maybe beginning instructors who are trying to grow in terms of their pedagogy and classroom skills, just how to engage students?
I can take this one, Anne, to start. So, I teach an elementary math methods class. And the best way for me to teach an elementary math methods class is to let my elementary math methods students teach. Right. And so I have them I want them to use messy tasks. These are like open-ended tasks where it's like, there's many ways for kids to approach it. They could use models, they could use, manipulatives, they could use drawing, it's, how do you solve it? Like, and then it's not really about the answer. It's about how do you represent your thinking, and how do you, how does students, or how do teachers like call on students thinking and have students compare thinking to each other and think like even a mistake can be a good way so like getting them to engage in the process of what does it mean to teach mathematics in the way that we're trying to do. And yeah, when they start, they're awful at it, right? They teach the way they were, unless they had a really good math teacher, but sometimes they had the rote memorization where I'm going to tell you what to do and then you regurgitate it versus here's a problem, try to solve it using what's available to you. And so getting them to see it and do it and then catch it, so, the stuff is better caught than taught sometimes. And so seeing how, like we just had an example, one of my students, beautiful, like she had a student provide a response. And so there's a IRE response, which is initiate, respond, and evaluate, which is like, hey, and what's the answer to this? And she says, whatever. And I say, good. And like, that's the traditional kind of response. And so the student asked a question like, hey, what did you get for this response? And so a student provided a response, and rather than saying good or anything, she turned to another question like, how do you think that she got to that? And it was like this perfect. It was perfect because it was like getting student to interact. And then so like being able to say, hey, there's an instance and call it out and say, this is what the kind of moves we want to make. And then seeing other students do it as well. And so thinking from my perspective is thinking about what I want my students to do, and putting them in facilitating environments where they get to try it, right? And try it in low stakes environment, things that, things that they'd want to study. I don't know. For me, like things I might want to study and study skills, maybe setting up for my upcoming mock draft in the, whatever, in the MBA, whatever, or something like that, where it's like, how am I going to organize my materials? How am I going to think about these things? And then you see some things that are like some of the tricks. You think, hey, you see that? That's something that, what are other methods that work? And so getting them to start seeing themselves as doers, doers of the thing that you want them to do. I mean, that's where I see is like, how do you get them to do the thing that you want them to do, and then support them along the way, right?
And I would add too, especially for new instructors or, people that are new to college teaching or whatever, it's about finding, like Joel was saying, you start with the student. That's really, really important. What do they need? What direction do they want to go? What do they like to do? And then also, what do they need in order to be successful in this content? But also, as the instructor, trying new things out. Some of the best things that I do are things that I literally remember the first time I wasn't familiar with it. I'm going to try using this strategy. I don't know if it's going to work, and being totally okay with that and giving it a chance and trying it out. And sometimes it doesn't work. Don't do it again, or fix it and try it again. But sometimes it works, and then you realize, hey, I'm going to use that. It's like adding tools to your tool belt. We talk about that a lot with pre-service teachers, that you're not going to use a tool that you've never used before. And so you have to try it for the first time first. And if you like it, you put it in your tool belt. Or if it didn't go great, you're like, but I think it was me, not the tool. Try it again. If it doesn't work again, throw it out. Try another one. So you're trying to fill your tool belt with, all these different tools. Sometimes I always say we have power tools. Those go-to things that we're really good at or we know work. And those are our power tools. We'll use them, but we need all the other little tools as well, little things that we can try, like working with small groups or some sort of small group project that you develop. And hey, that works really well. Let's do that again. Or, whatever it is, trying something different on Blackboard or, I think it's about trying things and being open to it not working. That's okay. Move on. Don't keep doing something that's not working. But, trying something new. And what's so great about trying things new is you end up finding all these things that you love to do. If it works well, you'll do it again. Mm-hmm. And the more you try, the more of these things are successful, and then you'll be able to use again, and you'll know when to use them. But go back to the students. Do they like it? Are they having success with it? Are they understanding the content when you use that type of strategy? Always the focus with the student centered when you make those choices, I think is really important.
And that's one thing that, just to add on to that Ann and I are looking at is like, just with elementary math teachers, just think about what is their current relationship with the content, right? Mm-hmm. With the thing that you're trying to teach, and thinking about, man, and we get some stories from, some of these students where, I did one a couple of years ago where there was a third grade substitute teacher who talked about a student never being good in math. And like, okay, well, that's something we need to talk about and address first. Like that, what do you think about that? What do you think of the role of the teacher there? That the fact that they still remember that has an impact. And so how do we process through that in order so that we can move forward, rather than let's just bury that, because it's going to be there unless you deal with it. So like, what's this relationship with the content we currently have? Maybe even with the study skills, it's maybe they're like, I've tried this stuff and it didn't work. Okay, so there's other things. Well, something does work for you because you're here, like you've done something. So like, yeah. How do we, start even with whatever is working and then build up from there? And so thinking about that, learning about relationships. So like, actually the first assessment is for the teacher to learn as much as they can about these students and to see how can I be the best teacher possible for them versus how, sometimes we focus in how can we be the best teacher of our content. Yeah, that's important, but it's like, how can I be the best teacher for the students that are coming into the classroom, which for this semester, that's really different, right? Just think about, there's all these sort of scenarios and things. So if I try to do the same thing, I would be in trouble, right? So I have to see, where are my students at? What kind of internet access do they have? What, kind of situation are they in? Are they going to have the ability to invest the time that I have? So how might I need to adjust things? How can I use group, whatever? So like, there's all sorts of things that we can do to adjust based off of who is in the classroom as well.
So talking about this tool belt analogy is very interesting. If you were to gift a tool belt to one of your students,
Ooh.
what are some key components that you think they need to have in it?
Gee, Jeremy, what a great question.
That is good.
That's a great question. Okay, I will just say one that I think is really important, and it's a little different, but I think it's important, and I think it's one people don't think about is, I think you have to, your biggest tool is your relationship with your students, one. But how do you build that tool? There's little mini tools that are part of that gigantic tool, right? And so one of them I think is using humor. How do you use humor with your classroom in an appropriate way? That's different depending on college versus K-12.
Right.
Things like I just don't think sarcasm works at all in any kind of teaching relationship, because I think there's a power dynamic that's not good with sarcasm. So I always tell my pre-service teachers, humor is awesome, but don't use sarcasm. That's for your friends. Keep that, there. But I think, so that relationship tool is huge, but it's really it's really a huge thing that's got components, and I think humor is one of them. So some of those interpersonal tools I think are important. Listening for teachers, it's one of those tools that people don't think about. How are you, teachers have to be great listeners. We're always thinking about, we need our students to be good listeners. Nope, we need the teacher to be the good listener. What are our students telling us? We listen as teachers, we listen with our eyes, we listen with our ears. What are the kids telling us? What are they getting frustrated about? What are they zoning out in the classroom that you do? What are they telling each other? So I think being a good listener is really, really important. Joel, so those are sort of some soft tools, Jeremy, if you will, that I think are really important, that might not come to mind right away, that are probably the most important tools you have as a teacher.
So I would think a curiosity about my students and technology and the content, like that curiosity piece is big. I just had a shameless plug in the math teaching podcast where Eris Winger was on, and he talked about it, like whenever you're comfortable in a classroom, that's when he gets uncomfortable. Like, how do we like get out of these ruts? So if we're kind of, were you doing the same thing over and over again, that we should question that, because the students in the world everything's changing. So that constant curiosity about, like, what could I tweak here, or how can I build better relationships? What are some other things I could learn? So like modeling that learning. And then that goes back to like thinking about, what is the picture, my tool is like a picture of the classroom. And like a lot of times we see the classroom as I think Parker Palmer talks about like a one-way street of like truth telling. Like I'm coming and I'm going to tell you exactly what it is. And it's only a one-way street from teacher to student, versus, you know what? We're all learning about this content, right? And that the fact that I might learn from you just as much as you might learn from me in this experience where we're coming together to learn this content. And so we're going to create environments where we're going to interact with the content, and we're going to learn from each other. And having that picture of a classroom where we could easily switch spots, where the student becomes a teacher and the teacher becomes a student, and then having that openness and that curiosity, like, tell me about that. And then they get to see themselves as competent in the classroom, and then their peers see them. And so now it's not just one person that knows all the answers. It's we're all learning to get a little bit better at this thing that we're in this classroom to learn about. So that's I guess my number one thing.
A concrete tool, Jeremy, if I can add, one that's I think so interesting now with the new dynamics of how we're meeting with a lot of the kids in a remote setting. So one of the big tools that teachers use is how to use cooperative groups and social interaction in the classroom with cooperative learning. There's so many different types of cooperative learning, so many ways you can structure it. And I think right now is a good time to be thinking about those kinds of things. How do we get interaction going? Because I think when you're not face-to-face all the time, or maybe you're not face-to-face in the same way when you're sitting a distance, even if you are face-to-face, it's not the same. Or you're in a remote setting, it certainly isn't the same. How can we utilize those wonderful tools of cooperative learning in different ways? There's so many different things you can do, expert groups, jigsaw grouping, but how do we utilize that, and how do we get students manipulating the content in a group setting where it doesn't, and I'm not talking about like, you know, there's lots of things you can do in a group and then where you end up having one person do all the work kind of thing. There's those types of strategies where you actually, you know, have a different assignments. You have something where they're working very ad hoc groups where you have this group working together, then you switch groups around and you have another group working together. Just thinking about the different ways you can use cooperative learning with your content. And that's a great, you know, sort of tool for your tool belt, especially right now with what's going on.
Right. And one thing that is new, or one thing that I saw that was new, was this year at Convocation, Dean Rock, who is the Dean of the School of Education, unveiled the virtual classroom that students are using. Could y'all talk about that and how that works? I know we talked a little bit about how you're training teachers to work with students in different settings, but that virtual classroom was something that was very interesting. And I've had a lot of students in my EDHE classes ask me about it. So could y'all talk about it for what it does for our students?
You want me to do that, Ann?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. It's Teach Live. I think it's going by Immersion now, but it's basically a virtual field experience.
Mm-hmm.
So and actually it has a bunch of different scenarios you can use. Counseling students use it in a counseling scenario. We use it primarily as a classroom where there's 5 students that are interacting with you as the teacher. There is an enactor who runs all of the students, and basically then, and each of those students has a personality and makeup that the enactors are trained on, and so they have different makeups and stuff, and so they have different voices, and that's through the system that they use, that they can make different voices and things like that. And so it's a chance for our students to plan a lesson and try it out with this small group of students and see how it goes, and see what the first time, you know, because a lot of times these students were first year or were the great students in the classroom, right? That always did what they were told and, you know, never had any misbehavior. And then all of a sudden you have it in a classroom where they might not necessarily do what they're being said. So I like to think of it as like an on-ramp to a full-scale classroom, right? It's a way to get them up to speed where they're going to, you know, be on that sharp part of the learning curve to see, like, just even some of the logistical things, like what does it mean to pace? Like I thought this was a lesson that would take me 15 minutes. That was done in, you know, 4. You know, and they talked so fast, or they had this, you know, verbal tick that they didn't know about because they had nerves up there. But it's a way to kind of fight through some of those early things that you'd experience as a classroom. It's not perfect, but it gives them a taste for what it looks like to think about what it means to be a teacher. I really liked it when I was teaching 352, which is a ed policy, but ed psych class. And so thinking about the different sorts of, you know, learning theories and like what kind of learning is happening here. What are you trying to accomplish with the questions that you're asking? And so it was kind of a nice way to put a real experience tied into some of this, you know, book knowledge that we're trying to teach. I don't know, Ann, if you had anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I always tell, I teach a couple of classes where the students go through a Teach Live field experience, virtual field experience. And the first time they do it, I say, this is just to kind of like, you know, stick your toe in the water. You know, you're not going out face to face with seeing kids live in the classroom yet, because this is the first class they take, the course that Joel was talking about, the Foundations or Ed Psych class. And so what is it like to stand up in front of a group of kids and try to teach a lesson? And what happens, and I literally, Joel, I'm so glad you said that. I just had my students, I'm teaching that class this semester, the EDCI 352 class this semester, and all of my students are going through Teach Live. And so every time we meet, we say, who's been to Teach Live? Tell us about what happened, you know, because they're nervous. They're like, whoa, what's going to happen? And so we share. And I had a student that was like, I taught the lesson and I still had 10 minutes and I didn't know what to do. And I said, welcome to teaching. You know, that's the whole idea. And so she's like, so here's what I did and here's what I did. And so we got to talk about the choices she made when that happened. And, you know, and it's a great way for her just to see, and other students just to see, kind of, it's like a little tiny snapshot into the life of what teaching is. And so they start thinking about things they didn't realize. Like they've been a student their whole life, What's it like on the other side? So it's just a way to get a little experience before you go into a classroom to kind of, and it really gets you thinking and about all the things that could happen. And like Joel said, we use it in a lot of other different scenarios. So it's not just, you know, getting your feet wet. We have seniors who use it to practice interviewing skills with a principal. Or we have the counselor ed students who use it to practice a counseling session. So we can, the great thing about the technology of Teach Live or immersion is that it can be used in a lot of different ways. We can do a classroom management role play. What happens when a kid won't put their cell phone up? You know, I mean, you can't go in, you probably will see that in a classroom while you're student teaching, but we can't train you on that because we don't know if it's definitely going to happen, right? But if we are in a Teach Live session, we can make it happen with these virtual kids. We can set up a scenario where they do certain things and then the teacher has to react. And then we can right there talk about the choices the teacher made, the good ones, the bad ones, what you can do next time. And so it's very moldable. The other great thing about, we've been using Teach Live for years, and Joel, I don't what, 6 years? I don't.
At least, yeah, it's been
a long time. The really cool thing is that when the pandemic happened was that people started calling us from other universities. And we're working with other places who want to send their teachers to our Teach Live, you know, to set up Teach Live sessions to have some kind of virtual field experience where they're not able to go out in the classrooms like they used to. So it's become a wonderful outlet for us during the pandemic. We were already using it, but just, you know, how important it has become now when we don't have the access to the schools that we used to.
You know, and while we're talking, there's another thought that came to mind about the toolbox. I can't get over the toolbox. I think that's like such a good analogy. In terms of a student's toolbox, because I think every student, of course, you guys are the experts on education, but I working with a lot of probation students over time, I've noticed that they all have so many great tools in their toolbox, but sometimes probation students in particular, of course, any student can experience life and the ups and downs of it, which impact their grades and their academic performance and things like that. But I find a lot of probation students struggle with just kind of staying engaged in the process and having kind of like curiosity for subjects. And I don't think it's because they're not curious, but I do think maybe there's some extenuating life concerns going on there. You know, it's hard for a student who's depressed to be really curious about accounting or something when they're just trying to survive. But in terms of education, how does one help a student who maybe has that dormant tool? It's there, it just hasn't kind of been released in a while, of helping a student develop curiosity for something, or for education in general?
And Joel, you can help me. I think that's the golden question, Rebekah. I think that's a really good question. And just, I don't know that I know the exact answer to that, but just what comes to mind is it's all about motivation, right? And what you said, you know, about when you have this other thing on your mind that's pressing, your mental well-being, your mother's health, your child's, whatever it is, you know, that's so present on your mind. And it's just a motivational thing, right? It's what are we motivated by? And those types of things really take our energy, and our motivation is toward those really important things that are maybe weighing heavy on us. Or sometimes it's the opposite. Maybe it's new exciting things in school or new opportunities or new relationships or whatever a freshman might have, or whatever it is, that our motivations are other places. So how do you put the motivation back on the content in the classroom? And again, with this challenge, overlaying challenge of maybe somebody who's got tools, but they're rusty, or you know, they haven't used them in a while, or they're not sure where to use them or whatever. The only thing that came to my mind, Rebekah, that just kept coming to my mind when you're asking that question was choice.
Yeah.
The importance of giving the student choice in how they express the content, their knowledge of the content, how they manipulate the content. So anytime an instructor can give a choice, I think it allows for an area, it really gives more motivation. So if I'm a student and I'm giving 3 different ways to, I give 3 different, you know, have 3 different opportunities to show that I know the content. Maybe I'm a student that's not that great of a writer. And so, you know, asking me to pull out a tool that helps me with writing is maybe not going to help me that much. But if that's one choice or I could make a video, or I could have an oral exam or have an interview with the teacher, then I might be more motivated because I can go a path that I know I have areas of strength. And I think that's motivational for people. Also, you're going to pick the thing that you are most interested in doing. And so that's motivational. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but I think it's more about, instead of picking up a tool that you've got in your toolbox, it's using the tools you like, allowing the students to use the tools they like. And so, or that they're good at. People want to be good at things, like nobody wants to be bad at things. But you want to give the students opportunity for success. And so choice allows for opportunity for success plus the motivational factor. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. That's very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I just added on to that. And I think it kind of piggybacks on what Ann said, because she's most often right. But like the asset-based perspective of a student and thinking about what are they bringing to the table, and like not even so just having from a student see themselves as not like what they're not doing. And I mean even, and I'll just push on like the label of probation student. That's probably hard for like to know that they are like a student who's on probation, like so like that's probably hard to even to start with. So like so getting the focus in on what are the assets that are bringing, like even if they're showing up to the class every day and they might not be performing, okay, there's an asset, right? And so okay, you're there every day, so now how do we best maximize the time that you're there? Like, and so looking at what are the different tools and that they, like Ann said, tools that they already use, things that they're good at, what are ways that they can express, and then maybe even helping them get some agency. If they see like the end product is a paper, but the paper is supposed to do hit these 3 objectives. Well, I can hit those objectives by doing something else, and maybe seeing, is that a possibility for the instructor? And so, someone in the law school, in our resilient teacher, she's like, someone did like a podcast episode rather than write this paper. And now she has that on some, terminology or something. Now she assigns that podcast episode for future students to listen to because it was so good at doing the things that she wanted. And it was like, well, now it's not just doing something to get a grade, it's doing something to benefit people further, so like if we can think about how do we create choice, and so we talk about product, process, and content. Like, what do we have ability to adjust as instructors to help a student? And so even to think from a student perspective, what do I have control of over here? How can I best use the tools I've been given to best meet the goals here? And to think, if they leave here knowing that that's the way that they can approach challenges that they're going to have in their life, is think about what I have, what are the things that I have in order to meet this goal. Like that's pretty good. That's a pretty good skill to leave with, is like, what, here's this I just thinking about the movie The Martian and how he just kept working the problem, right? Whatever the next problem is, let's keep working at the problem and using what he had. And so love that movie. Good science movie. Anyway, but just keep moving forward with thinking about what are the assets I have and how can I use it in order to best move forward with this challenge.
Good point. Yeah, because I think probation students, every student has so many strengths, but sometimes it's just they get so overwhelmed, and that's what we try to help them do, is kind of see, here are all these strengths, and let's kind of, but I hadn't really thought about it in that way, so that's really helpful. Well, now we're on to the lightning round, which is very exciting, and this is where we put you guys in the hot seat to know.
Is it a competition? That'd be awesome.
That's to beat Joel, so this is great.
Well, I like that competitive side of y'all. We can always do that for a future episode, some sort of competition. I think that's a great idea.
Some buzzers, that'd be great. Oh,
yeah, that would be really fantastic. So we're curious to know what your experience was like as a college student. So tell us about your freshman year. Paint us a picture. What was, your life like at the time?
You want me to start, Joel?
Yeah. I'd like you to start.
I'm older than Joel, so mine was longer ago. So you just want a general picture of what my entire college first year was like generally speaking?
Anything you want to share, feel free.
That's what I want to share. I would say, generally speaking, kind of like Joel had mentioned before, you know, I was just lucky to have opportunity to be set up for success, I think, in school. And I've always wanted to be a good student, I guess. Like that's always been, and had, you know, opportunity to be a good student. And it's, you know, I had a lot of supports and things like that to be a good student, especially coming from a family of educators and supportive parents and a good education and a foundational education. So I went to Berry College in Rome, Georgia, my freshman year, and it was not that far from home. I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee, so it's about an hour and a half drive or so. And so that was probably good for me. You know, I didn't want to go wander too far. But it was a smaller school, and I think it provided a lot of great opportunities. But I think with some of the just changes of college, I stayed 1 year and then I went elsewhere. But just sort of the changes and just, you know, that age and my boyfriend breaking up with me freshman year, all those kinds of things, you know, just kind of leave you depressed. So just those kind of challenges. But generally a good experience academically for sure. I enjoyed the classes, and it's kind of funny because I grew up with a large family, and so living in a dorm with a bunch of people wasn't that different. Sharing a bathroom with a bunch of people wasn't that different. So I didn't have a lot of adjustment in terms of that. There were 3 of us in our dorm room. So, and I actually had gone to high school with those gals, the 2 gals that were in my dorm room. So that wasn't the big adjustment for me. I think it was more just, you know, dealing with, you know, just changes and that kind of thing. But overall, I had a successful academic year for sure, and enjoyed that. Just, I think for me, I just felt like at the time I felt the school was just too small. It was kind of like the same old thing I'd been used to. I'd gone to Catholic school from kindergarten through 12th grade, and I felt like I was just in the same situation.
Mm-hmm.
But just with no boyfriend. So, so that was my general.
This is the rapid fire round.
That was just my general experience. But you know, it's funny because you know, when I work with college kids, I realize they're going through the same stuff. You know, you're trying to balance being in a different setting, and whether that's very different from you, like living in a dorm. For some kids, that's like crazy to have to share a bathroom. You know, we're lucky them. And for some, it's not. But so you're dealing with a lot of changes at all the different levels, academic changes. So for some kids going to college, the requirements in terms of academics may be very different than what was, you know, expected of them in high school. Maybe it's the same, maybe it's harder, maybe it's not. And so I think, you know, I think that's an interesting question, Rebekah, to ask, because I'm always trying to remember what it was like for my students. It's been so long ago that I think it's important for us as instructors to kind of remember everything they're going through, and on all levels. But so anyway, that's the long and short of it. Joel, what happened to you, my friend?
So basically everything that Ann said, except the opposite. So I came from a small public school in northern Wisconsin called Altoona, and went to the University of Wisconsin. I was I think 2 people from my school that went there, but I'd never interact with the other person. So, I mean, I was on my own in a dorm in the middle of this huge campus, which Madison, Wisconsin is the seat, the capital and the university are on opposite ends of State Street. And so it was just kind of like eye-opening. Like, you know, I remember, you know, just never, I mean, very open to all sorts of different experiences. I was pretty good academically. So I was in an honors dorm where like we had people come, like Senator Russ Feingold came, Kurt Vonnegut, like, you know, before he died, was there to do a talk for some of the students in there. So I had these like really cool experiences. And then a very cool experience was our kind of, you know, first year course that everyone took. It was called Ways of Knowing. I don't know, it was an interesting name for the course, but it was a 1 credit just seminar, just show up and you got exposed to all these different slices of the university and like some of the history of it, you know, so Wisconsin has a pretty good history of things that happened in the 60s and all the different scientific discoveries, and like just the, kind of developing this, what has happened here, both good and bad, and thinking about now you're a part of that. And now what does it mean for you to get your education and go forward from here? And so it's like, I don't know, like if I had a spirit animal, it's a badger. I mean, that's what it would be. And I was built up from that very moment. I mean, I remember I did send an application to Vanderbilt, and then I was like, well, what am I doing? I'm going to Wisconsin. And like, it was, maybe that was my only rebellious moment, I guess, in high school, but then just, yeah, to have all these experiences, it was like, this was great. And like, having not a lot of ideas about what I'll take it back. I had a lot of ideas about what I wanted to do, but just not knowing what it would be, but feeling like, at this university, I'm going to find it. And so that was like reassuring, is like people were there to help have conversation, guide you. And so it was a great experience. I mean, I was alone, but I wasn't alone at the same time. So it felt good. Like I met some good folks there.
Okay. So who would you say has been a source of inspiration for you throughout your career development?
For me, that's an easy question for me because it's my Aunt Kathleen. One of my teacher aunts, right? All of them certainly inspirational, but she is my special person. I think everybody needs to have a special person. And so I say that because growing up, I'm one of 5 kids, and like I said, I had great parents and all of that, but it's nice to have that one person that thinks you're just extra, extra special. And so my Aunt Kathleen was that for me. So, I was her favorite. Everybody knows, it's not like a secret. And so I used to love to go over to her house and spend the night. And, we'd have all those, fun rituals. I'd get to go through the Wendy's drive-through and get a Frosty. And then I'd eat like a half of it, and she'd put it in the freezer, and I'd never eat the rest of it again because Frosties are no good after they've been frozen. And just the whole, then she'd make me warm milk before bed, and then she'd make up the couch for me to sleep on. And then I never slept on the couch. I just went and got in bed with her. These rituals that,
Right.
that you're a person. And so she was a single mother and a school teacher. And my cousin Judy, she had one daughter, my cousin Judy, who was about 12 years older than me. So a lot of the time I spent with Kathleen, Judy was already out of the house, so it was just kind of me and my Aunt Kathleen. And she went back to school to get her doctoral degree. And so I remember I was, I think in 6th grade when she finished it. She went to Vanderbilt, and she would drive back and forth. They had like a program where they had like the weekend, like the doctoral candidates would go on the weekends. And I sometimes would go to Nashville with her and ride up there, and she'd have the classes. And then she was a school teacher principal, and then she ended up working at the central office in the school district. And so for me, her trajectory was always sort of in the back of my mind. That's something I could do if I did want to one day go back to school and get a doctoral degree. Certainly the teaching and her leadership was motivational for me. I used to go, when I had spring break at my school, her school would be in session, and I got to go to school with her. And I wanted to be a teacher already at a young age. So I loved to go to the school, and she'd put me in she could put me in a classroom, or I could sit in her office, just the kind of fun of being at school. I love schools, the smell of schools, the smell of the cafeteria, all those crazy things. I just love it. And so for me, it was definitely my Aunt Kathleen.
And for me, it would be my clinical instructor, or my cooperating teacher, as we called them back in the day, was Joe Dye. He was a high school football coach in Janesville, Wisconsin, Janesville Parker High School. And for some reason, I got placed with him, and Janesville was about 45-minute drive from Madison. And I was really upset that I got placed there, because I'm like, I don't want to drive. I'd rather be placed in Madison. And the person placed me, like, trust me, you'll be good. And got there, and I mean, it was everything that I wanted. He was the head football coach, but he was the chair of the math department, and he would never allow anyone in his classroom to call him coach, because he's like, I'm a teacher first and a coach second. He's a Hall of Fame football coach, but he's like, I am a teacher first. And when he didn't when he wasn't doing excellence on the football field, it was excellence in the classroom, and just seeing how he built relationships. I mean, he would be teaching a lesson. He did mostly like fairly traditional like lessons, but you could see like he had so many relationships with kids and the families, and just being the football coach, lots of interactions with siblings and and kids that were on the in his classroom too, and just all these different ways that he would connect with students and then take those connections and put them into his lessons. It was like, this was it. And his mantra is the common mantra of like, the kids are not going to know care what you know until they know that you care. And that was evidence with him. He went and got his master's degree in counseling, not to become a counselor, but to become a better teacher, better coach, a better in his position. And it was just like, that was the moment when I saw, here's someone who was saying one thing and then doing the actions that lined up with it. And then to top it all off, I was student teaching when 9/11 happened. And to see, I mean, I still remember that day and everything that happened and how he handled that situation. And again, it was right in line with, they don't care that you know until they know that you care. And he showed them that he cared that day, and like taking care of their needs and thinking about all these, all the, the ramifications of it. And even caring for me too, because he knew, like, my fiance at the time was, in a big city at the time, and knew that and was asking me about that. And like, is she okay? Like, you check in, like, just someone like that. And still and then when I became was a doc student and teaching methods classes at the University of Wisconsin, having him come in and talk to my students and like taking that same level of excellence in there. And just like, it was just one of those things where I'm like, okay, this is someone who I want to model after, of being someone who like says one thing and then follows it up with the actions, but is constantly looking to improve. And that was him too. So it was, and I need to call him because I haven't called him in a while. So that just reminds me.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. Well, we appreciate all the work that you do. I mean, it's just incredible. And I can tell, just talking to you both, how passionate you are about teaching. And that's something where, I mean, teachers impact students' education, of course, but also just their life trajectory in so many ways. So clearly you're doing great work, and we appreciate you being on the show. And any final words of advice, things that you'd want people to know or keep in mind during the pandemic?
I got one. Teachers are amazing. Like, and you think about all the different variables that have just been thrown at teachers, and you see the things that they're, the pressures of parents and administrators, and even different student situations and changing, and like the fact that they're willing to adapt, figure things out, recording lessons. I mean, there's a teacher at our local school, because he'd read out a novel, and because it's hard to read with a mask on, he went and recorded it, and now it's available for all students to have access to this novel, no matter if they are in his class or not. And it's like these things that teachers are doing. And just to, I mean, there was a lot of outpouring for teachers at this initial part of the pandemic, but like, we need to keep that momentum going, because they are unbelievable. And the fact that it's just an honor to get to interact with them and train them, and seeing how they are developing, students that are now classroom teachers, teaching my kids, which is pretty amazing too, and seeing what they're doing. It's just, they're amazing. These teachers are amazing.
I definitely agree with that for sure. In terms of advice, and this is just obviously something that I'm still reminding myself to do. So it's the little things that you do that make a big difference when you're teaching. And and right now during the pandemic, just advice about outreach to the students, just little things to show connection, to make connection with them. It's something as simple as you're grading something on Blackboard, and you read right now I'm grading our students write a philosophy of education, and I'm reading everybody's philosophies. And there's like, if I just see a sentence I just love that speaks to me, I'm going to send an email out to that student, and I'm going to try to, take a minute just to say, hey, I just read your philosophy. I just want to say this quote, really made me think. I absolutely love this. And just send it out. And I've got 40 students in my class. I don't have to do that with everybody, but I need to do something, or I notice I'm in Zoom and I see somebody I know this sounds silly, but somebody has a new haircut. hey, like, just little things that make little connections. Or, I saw one of our students is doing some TikTok things for the School of Ed, one of my former students, and it was just really great what they did. So I just shot him an email. Hey, I just saw you did this. Thanks so much for helping us out, that type of thing. Those little tiny little things, it seems very small to us and it doesn't take a lot of time, but it makes a big impact on the student to make just those little connections. I think that would be a tip from me.
Well, we sure do appreciate your being willing to come on the show, share your wisdom and advice and your experiences. And yeah, we just appreciate all that you do. And I'm Rebekah Reysen, and we've got Jeremy Roberts and two amazing guests. Thank you so much for joining us, and check us out on YouTube and of course, all kinds of podcasts and social media, but we'll see you next week. Thanks.